Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jenny. I'm here today to share with you my rankings list for the BookTube Prize 2024 Nonfiction Group C. So I didn't hate any of the books in my group, which was great, but I also didn't love a ton of them. So I felt pretty lukewarm about them in general, like as a grouping. And I don't know if that's necessarily to do with the books or just the combination of the books for me, or if it was something more about the time in my life when I was trying to read these books, which was a very, very busy time. So, and it was very all-encompassing. But without further ado, I'm going to get into the rankings. And I just wanted to say that it is very hard to rank books when you don't dislike any of them, because it's hard sometimes to choose a book and put it in 6th or 5th when you do actually think it was a good book, but you have to rank them. There's just no choice on the matter. So my number 6 book was A Memoir of My Former Self, A Life in Writing by Hilary Mantel. And I did do extensive vlogs on all of these, so if you want to hear my more in-depth thoughts, you can head to those vlogs. But in a nutshell, the reason why this is my number 6 book is because I believe that the publishers made a mistake in how they put this book together. This is a collection of Hilary Mantel's essays, and they're posthumous. So they were published after she had died, and they were assembled in a way that I don't think worked very well. So some of the essays pertained to her work around the Wolf Hall trilogy. Some were a compendium of her film reviews, book reviews, thoughts about when she lived in Saudi Arabia, just like a whole bunch of different things that didn't really go together to me. And to me, if you would have bound them in smaller collections and maybe made a beautiful box set or something, or just rethought how they wanted to package these writings, I think it would have made the book more effective, and it would have felt like a more cohesive collection. I just didn't find all of the essays equal in interest, and I think that it really did a disservice to the overall feel of the book for me that they were bound up in this way. So while I think the editor, having worked with Hilary Mantel throughout her career, knew Hilary Mantel fairly well, I also think that it felt a little bit forced to me, as if the publisher was trying to take advantage of the fact that they weren't going to have any more Hilary Mantel books, and so now they had to try to get some more, I don't know, money out of the situation or something. It just didn't feel like it was thoughtfully put together for me enough. So that was why the book was put in number 6. There were some interesting essays in there, and I do appreciate that I have read that, but I definitely think that in going back and reading any more of Hilary Mantel's work, that I would be more interested in some of the work that she published, her actual memoir that she published before she died. So that's my number 6. My number 5 was Crossings by Ben Goldfarb, How Road Ecology is Shaping the Future of Our Planet. This is an environmental book. This talks about the impact of roads in the 20th and 21st centuries. I found it was really interesting in parts to learn about these different the different animals who are affected, and the way that roads pollute, and the way that roads have taken over our planet essentially in a lot of ways, and the way that people are trying to prevent more animal extinctions from them. That was also really interesting. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with it. It just wasn't as compelling to me as some of the other books I've read, and I didn't feel like, I do think this is an important topic again, but I also try to consider the mass appeal of a book and like how relevant it is for imminent consumption. And this book is a period, documents a period of time and hints a little bit as to what the future will bring, but the future hints are a bit dire. So it had to go somewhere. It went to number 5. Again, a well-researched and important topic. So my number 4 book was actually the first book that I listened to in my grouping, and that is What an Owl Knows by Jennifer Ackerman. And I feel like, which happens a lot, my number 4 and my number 3 could have interchanged on any given day, and I decided to put What an Owl Knows in number 4 on the ranking day, but it could have interchanged with number 3, sorry, in another day. So What an Owl Knows was fine on audio, and I enjoyed listening to it. I like birds. I particularly like owls, so it was great to learn more information about them. That book is the furthest away from me, so I guess I have the least amount to say about it. I think it's a good book. If you're interested in learning more about owls, check it out. Other than that, I just, again, it's such a specific topic. I don't think if you're just generally wanting to read nonfiction that it would be necessarily the first book you'd pick up. But owls are super important species on our planet, and if you want to understand their intricacies of their species, then pick up the book. It was well researched. I wasn't hugely fond of the way Jennifer Ackerman laid it out and grouped things together, because she talked about owls more topically than based on their specific species designation, or their type, or whatever you call that. So like barn owls or barred owls or snowy owls, she didn't keep them separate. She kind of interchanged them through each section, and that was a little bit harder to retain the information about the individual species of owls through. But ultimately, it was super interesting, and I enjoy learning about people who are working to conserve different animals in different parts of our ecosystem. So again, it was a good book. It went to number 4. My number 3 book was Built from the Fire by Victor Luckerson. Now, as I said, this could have interchanged with What an Owl Knows multiple times. And I have to say that out of all of the books, I did find Built from the Fire probably the most challenging to get through. And that was because, for a couple of reasons. One of them is because it was very long. It was over 500 pages, which is a lot of information. It was about Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was about the Black community that lived there and was building up what was called Black Wall Street, and how a riot that was incited by white racist people destroyed the wealth that had been accrued during the early 20th century, and basically set back most of the people who had come to Tulsa to grow a community and to work and live and have a normal life in a place called Greenwood. And they weren't able to do that because of racism. So the book spans the, kind of beginnings of Greenwood right through to today. It's a community that still exists. It's a community that still has a lot of importance in the African American community. And, you learn about different families who established the area, who stayed, some who left, what they did, how they subsisted, how they grew their businesses, how they struggled, how they thrived. There were great stories in there. Also a lot of gentrification, a lot of, the inner workings of cities as they try to control neighborhoods that they deem undesirable, or control people who aren't fitting into the mold of the white supremacist society that they're trying to create. So a super important book. For someone who's not doing research on Tulsa, Oklahoma, who's not, going in there trying to gather this information for a specific purpose, it got a bit too specific for me in places where I just, I just felt that I was kind of overwhelmed by the amount of information. But I think as a work of historical nonfiction, a work documenting a time period and a people, it was very well done, and definitely an important read in terms of the evolution of Black people in America, because it is, you can see Tulsa and Greenwood as a microcosm of the larger macrocosm of the African American experience in the United States over the 20th century. So, it does apply to a larger picture, but it does get very micro in the details. My number 2 book was Master, Slave, Husband, Wife by Ilyon Wu. This is a true story that Ilyon Wu narrates amazingly, sharing the story of this fantastic couple who escaped slavery, before the Underground Railroad is like officially established, or at the time where the Underground Railroad is being established. And how they did this was by the wife disguising herself as a white gentleman and her husband pretending to be her slave, and they escaped that way. And it covers, a huge portion of the abolitionist movement of Black people who escaped to freedom and then, kept working for emancipation. It is a really interesting, fascinating story. I hope someone makes it into a movie. I feel like it would be a really great film, super interesting. And it was very well written. It read like a novel for most of it. There were some parts that got a little slow, but I think it's challenging when you're dealing with a true story and you're trying to piece together the story as coherently as possible, because there were parts of the story that the couple shared when they were out, on stages, advocating for abolition. And sometimes those stories also filtered through family members, filtered through people who met them here and there. So it changed from time to time. It evolved. But it was really, really interesting. And the story of the Kraft couple, Kraft family, they go on to have a family together. And so it was a really powerful story, and I would encourage everyone to read it. I think it has, again, a really important place in the history of the United States, and I'm really glad that Ilyon Wu wrote it. All right, so by process of elimination, that brings us to my number 1, and my number 1 was Doppelganger by Naomi Klein, A Trip into the Mirror World. So for me, this book has such a relevance to right now on many, many levels. But it's interesting because it's also a very personal story about Naomi Klein being mistaken for Naomi Wolf, especially online during COVID. That became even more apparent. And it's about Naomi Klein's personal story of becoming, in her own words, very obsessed with Naomi Wolf, because she's trying to understand how this person can evolve from a feminist, liberal, into what she is today, which is someone who frequents Steve Bannon's podcast and was a really strong advocate of the anti-vax movement during COVID. And so there's so much in here. There is an amazing chapter on the relationship between Israel and Palestine in regards to Naomi Klein's perspective as a left-leaning Jewish woman, and I found that to be so helpful and enlightening in terms of helping my own understanding of this relationship. And there's just a lot in here that pertains to right now. There was a lot of COVID in here, and I've said before that reading about COVID I find difficult right now. It's just, it's still so close. It just feels like we're still going through it in so many ways, and it feels challenging to revisit those feelings and those times so soon, but it is what it is. And authors today are trying their best to put perspective onto something that we still are so close to and is still quite raw for most people. And so this also obviously explores the literature, film, and the kind of zeitgeist of doppelgangers in our society. And so Naomi Klein, her own doppelganger conundrum brings her to explore all these other ones. And she does a great job of exposing different authors who have talked about this, films, and how it affects you mentally, how it affects your own sense of your own identity when someone is mistaking you for someone else all the time. So yeah, just really well written. This is actually the first time I've read Naomi Klein, which I feel embarrassed to say, but I think she's an exceptional writer. And so this book, quite easily for me was my number one, because it was the one that I wanted to read the most, wanted to keep engaging with the most, compared to all the others. So there you have it. There is my rankings for the second round of BookTube Prize 2024 Nonfiction Group C. And if you read these books in this group, I'd love to hear your opinions, your rankings. I want this book to get to the top 3. If this gets, I couldn't even tell you if this gets eliminated what that means. Yeah, so that is that for today. Thank you so much for watching. I will be back again soon with another video.